Hello Internet, this is Daniel with Driving and Dragons. Today we are going to do a quick rundown of the general drama of the tabletop role-playing game space on social media, just because I don't really want to spend a ton of time on it. I don't find a lot of what's going on particularly interesting, and a lot of it is stuff that's been covered, been rehashed, been done to death, so it doesn't really bear a tremendous amount of input. On the Z, we're going to finish up some work on the air system, but because I'm still waiting on some parts and a few other things, I'm going to start doing some compilation videos of different things that went on in the restoration, maybe going back to some of the previous videos, what I still have footage for. I may even go out and shoot some walk-around footage and stuff at some point, and maybe even go take a look at my other project car, the Camaro, that's sitting around waiting for the suspension to get put on so I can start rebuilding it. And then we will move on to the next section on world building. So let's talk from the top when it comes to drama. Easy thing is one thing that's come up is what is the BROSR drama? This one I find particularly amusing because if you ask 3 different members of the BROSR, you will get 3 different definitions. You will get them claiming members who then turn around and say, yeah, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not a member. And I say I'm not a member. I just kind of hang out with some of them. Most notably, Harmony Ginger, who, oh yeah, definitely BROSR member. She's so much BROSR. She's so BROSR. And she's like, no, I don't really claim to be that. I'm kind of bro adjacent, but that's about it. I talked to some of them. I interviewed a few of them. I'm cool with them, and I'm exploring their style of playing the game, but not a bro. And then you can't even get the same definition out of all of them, because just over the past week or so, I've heard 3 or 4 different definitions of the BROSR, but they all kind of come down to a couple of things. One, they push the online Chad alpha male energy, which is ironically not alpha male at all. It's just try hard. They are zealots when it comes to rules as written, and tend to push the only correct way to play is rules as written. And then on top of that, they are Bronstein gamers. As a matter of fact, on the Ultra American TTRPGs stream, a BROSR member who was speaking about the BROSR even said that membership in the BROSR requires that you run or are part of a Bronstein. And they, of course, hold up First Edition Dungeons & Dragons as the greatest role-playing game ever, the greatest tabletop role-playing game of all time. It's better than all others, and it's more or less perfect, being played specifically rules as written. And that's really the core tenets of the BROSR. Personally, I disagree with about 90% of what comes out of their mouths, but they do have some good core points. You should learn to play the way a game is designed and the way a game is written before you start making changes. It's very important to understand why a rule exists before you change it. They do tend to push kind of an idea of discipline and personal responsibility, which those are good things. They just tend to take it to kind of a stupid level. But they're absolutely wrong about the one true way to play, just like everybody else is ultimately wrong about the one true way to play type situation. And let's face it, AD&D is a fundamentally and deeply flawed system. It's the first edition. Gary Gygax himself had multiple changes he wanted to make to it because it was a deeply flawed system. There were things that were put together that when they hit the ground in the real world just didn't play out the way they needed to, and they needed to be adjusted. But the bros tend to not accept that. And then of course the Bronstein style of play is very much a wargaming style, and it lends itself very heavy to wargaming and a wargaming feel with the fog of war and a bunch of the other stuff that goes into it, which is an interesting way to play, but that's all it is. It is one of many interesting ways to play. That's it. And frankly, it contradicts a lot of what's in the rule book, despite the fact that they are aggressively rules as written. So, BROSR, come on. From what I hear from your own members, there's only about 12 of you. Get together and figure out exactly what you guys are so that we can all stop talking about it. Next up, Wizards of the Coast, doing it again. Not spending a lot of time on this. Wizards of the Coast is Wizards of the Coast. They're doing the stuff that everybody's warned you about for years. The same stuff that their sycophants and their paid shills and their homers have cried, oh, it's not going to be that way, it's not going to be, y'all are just fear-mongering, y'all are, oh, it's always a major problem. No, this is where we all get to say we told you so. They came flat out after all the promises about no AI, no AI. What does Chris Cox tell a bunch of Goldman Sachs investors? We're absolutely embracing AI. We're using AI. We're using machine learning to help refine and develop our product. We're very importantly not going to use it as finished product, and we have strict rules about our artists and contributors and how they use AI, but we're going to be embracing AI. Simple fact of the matter is, AI is the future. Major corporations are always going to use it. They're not really going to have a choice in using it because the ones who don't are going to have higher costs than their competitors who don't. And it really just shortens the workload, and it shortens the timelines when you're putting together books or anything else, when you can, books or different products, when you can run it through a machine learning program or run it through AI to build your base and then go off of that. An artist can very easily say, give me this concept, AI, give me 10 versions of this concept, then pick out the one that's closest to what they've got floating in their head, refine it, and make it something nice, and make it a unique piece of artwork that was derived from AI. Or they can turn around and go the opposite way, create a new unique piece, and use AI to refine it and clean it up. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that Wizards of the Coast was pretty explicit about coming out and pandering that they weren't going to do it anymore. And lying is not something you can do. There is no excuse for that. So Wizards needs to, their messaging is all screwed up, and it couldn't come at a worse time when they're trying to push this new player's handbook and stuff out, that they're going to have more of this egg fly up on their face as they basically lie to their customers and then turn around and talk to investors, and they may very well be lying to the investors, which kind of goes into their player's handbook. Because of their obsession with things other than just making a decent game, surprising no one, you already have errata on a book they just released and haven't even fully released. The books came out, there's like 3,000 copies came out, and it's like, oops, we have to change stuff that's in them. By the way, if you want the changes, you got to get them online, and they might be in the new prints of the new book, but congratulations, you just made 3,000 collector's editions, the book of the original rules, before we went back and fixed the stuff we missed. Because despite dragging this out, despite having this lengthy launch, despite doing this slower than originally intended, we were so focused on DEI and pandering and shitty art with tacos and sushi in it and Mexican orcs that we didn't bother to make a good game and release a halfway decent product right off the bat. Congratulations, Wizards of the Coast, you wrote a book that has a day one patch. Speaking of, the last piece of Wizards of the Coast screw up drama for this week, which, I mean, how the hell they can screw up this much in this short a period of time and continue to exist is just beyond me. Like we've all been telling you for years now, people who wouldn't listen, from small channels like mine all the way up to bigger channels, all the way up to even some people like your DM layers and stuff have said it. The game is going VTT. The game is going AIDMs. The game is going D&D Beyond. They are pushing players onto the digital platform. They do not want you to have books. They do not want you to play at your kitchen table with your friends. They want you online where they can mold you into a subscription service, where they can go ahead and change and alter rules and stuff as they are, where they can do stuff like take away assets that you paid for because there's a new version, and you got to pay for the new version because they took away the old version, not even allowing you to play the old game anymore. Do you have an outcry and they give it back? Sure. Are they going to keep it given back, or are they going to take it again? Of course they are. So quit trusting Wizards of the Coast. Start listening to the people who tell you, hey, writing's on the wall and here's what the words are. It's time to start listening to the prophets down here in the commentary space, at least the ones who aren't sucking on the boots of the WOTC thugs. Next thing up, the OSR Classic Gamer rebrand. Because OSR has become such a toxic term just because there's so many different branches of it, and for whatever reason, and I will never get this, large branches of the OSR just each little piece wants to say they're the real OSR and they want to fight about it. And they want to fight about what the OSR is. Is it a design school? Is it a movement? Is it a particular style of play? Is it an entire philosophy of games? It can be all these different things, and it can be none of them at the same time. And I guarantee you that there's somebody who's going to die on each and every one of those hills, swearing to God they're right. And to me, it's kind of honestly the death knell came for the term OSR, because the brilliant folks over with The Secret of Blackmore, old Griff, decided to pitch a fit over the term Bronstein and get into a beef with Harmony Ginger. I'm just going to tell you this right now. If you are in the TTRPG space and not just a garden variety Dungeons and Dragons shill, don't fuck with Harmony. Don't mess with her. Why? Because she's nice to just about everybody. She's pleasant. She doesn't stir up crap. She doesn't get into it with people. And it just, anybody who messes with her just comes across as somebody who's going and like kicking everybody's kid's sister. It doesn't matter what you say or how you do it, you're going to get the blowback from it, because she doesn't really do anything objectionable, and you just come across as an asshole when you do stupid stuff, like say you're going to sue her over IP that doesn't exist and isn't enforceable and you don't own. But anyway, it poisons the entire idea of what is the OSR. So a lot of them come together. It's like, you know what? I don't want to be associated with that guy or that chick or those people over there. How about we just call ourselves classic gamers and come up with a whole new thing? I hate to say this because unfortunately this is me agreeing with Clown Door DM, but you know what they say, a broken clock gets it right twice a day? He's absolutely right when he says that rebranding will not fix the problem if you do not go in and change the behavior. Calling yourselves classic gamers to move away from the OSR, but then going back and doing the same stupid tribalism, instead of just having open discussion about different ways to play and seeing the good and the bad in each section and working together and supporting each other. Instead of doing that, you're going to be the same Ouroboros that just eats its own tail, just turns back on itself and devours itself. Every last one of you is Ungoliant from the Silmarillion. You suck up all the light of the OSR trees, and then you run off into the desert and get so hungry you eat yourself. Okay? That's not what we need to be doing. And a rebrand ain't gonna fix it. So congratulations, the blindest of the blind squirrels, Clown Door DM, got to find a nut, because the OSR just can't seem to learn things. And in this case, I talk about the OSR as an overall community, not as a design school, not as a gaming philosophy, but as a group of people who are focused predominantly on on the older styles of play, be it Bronstein, be it good old-fashioned dungeon crawling, be it randomly generated stuff, be it zero prep dungeons, and which is an oxymoron. I'm telling you right now, nobody who quote-unquote does zero prep actually does zero prep. At best, you're using somebody else's prep, the person who made all the tables and stuff. But you ain't doing zero prep, so get over yourself. You're not somehow better than anybody. Last thing I'm going to talk about here is probably the most widely talked about one here recently, and that is generic Ginny D. Good old generic Ginny managed to step in it big, even though she has everybody who's talking about it blocked and really doesn't care, and her sycophantic White Knight simps are of course going to be out there. You know, it's the siege of Ginny D, and the winged simpards are charging down the hill to defend her. But what is the problem? It's real simple. I was going to do a reaction to the video she put out and decided against it, because I was like, all she's really doing is confirming something that I know I've been saying forever. I've called Ginny D generic Ginny for a long time, and I've always said, because this is what generic Ginny D is. She was a generic garden variety 6 cosplayer who couldn't hack it against people like, say, an Adrian Curry or somebody who has real, like a actual freaking model who comes out and does cosplay. So she found a niche where she could be more than generic. In D&D, where no cosplayers were given any attention, she could be an 8 or a 9. She could be a much cuter girl. But just by comparison, because there wasn't exactly a wealth of models lining up to go into the tiny little niche that is Dungeons and Dragons cosplaying. So big fish, small pond. And the second reason I call her generic Ginny D is because this is an extremely inexperienced 5e player who has only been playing for a handful of years. Most of the time she's been playing, she has been a big internet sensation, which means she hasn't been buckled down at her friend's table playing games, getting hours, learning rule books and stuff like that. She has had to be, from the second she picked up dice, a public figure speaking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's what she is. As a result, she has never really developed any depth of knowledge for the game, or any depth of knowledge for the hobby itself, or for the art form of being a good dungeon master, even in a more narrative style. You add that to the fact that she's a raging leftist, which means she has to play all of the social games and all the social justice and DEI games too, your safety tools, your X cards, your lines and veils and all this kind of stuff, because she even has to work all that in whether she really wanted to or not. This detracts from her ability to have any depth in anything she does. Therefore, 99% of all the advice is very generic. She actually does give some pretty decent beginning level, very surface level player and GM advice in some of her videos. Some of her stuff is not that bad. I've said plenty of good things about her being right when she presents things in some of the videos I've reviewed. I've not been wholly negative against her. But I've also pointed out that the places where she gets it right are kind of places where everybody gets it right. I mean, they're the kind of thing you don't need a video to tell you. You just naturally figure it out because it's basic, it's generic. So she's generic Jenny. So what did generic Jenny do to stir up drama? She first releases a video about how she had panic attacks or anxiety problems because she was brought in as a celebrity dungeon master at an event called D&D in a Castle, where you pay sometimes as much as 12 or 13 grand, but I believe the minimum barrier to entry is like $6,000 for you to go spend an inclusive vacation in a castle and play Dungeons & Dragons with celebrity DMs. And you can kind of break it down to thinking that these people are paying like 3 grand to play D&D. I don't know how much money Jenny D made from it. We know she got a vacation. We know that she was paid. We know she was paid considerable sum for a paid GM to be at D&D in a castle. And it's overwhelming. There's so much pressure on you. You almost have an anxiety attack because of what's riding on this. Well, you know what would help that? Well, what would really help it is having some actual professional ethics, which apparently Jenny D lacks. Because when you are a supposed celebrity DM, when you are somebody who is supposed to be something of an expert, when you are supposed to be the kind of DM who runs a game that is worth paying 3 grand to sit at the table, there is a certain level of expertise that is expected from that. And if you don't have that expertise, then you should politely decline and say, I'd love to put in an appearance, I'd love to be a celebrity player to help their gaming experience, to be there. I know that I have some celebrity, but I really shouldn't be a game master for any of these tables. I shouldn't be running the games. Why? Because, as she admitted in a later video, she hadn't even read the DMG. Oh, she'd flipped through it a little bit, but she'd never really read it. And when she talks about it, read it cover to cover, like a book. But realistically, what she's saying is that she never actually gave any real credence to what's in the Dungeon Masters. Now, you might say I'm a hypocrite because I comment on 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and I haven't read the DMG all the way through, or I talk about a lot of games here online that I've played and that I've run and that I've been a player in, but I maybe haven't gotten real in depth on all the rule books and all the supplements and stuff. But there's a couple of differences. For one, I don't hold myself up as a great expert in everything. Most of my advice is pretty system agnostic. Second off is kind of like say Seth Skorkowski, for instance. He's covering a large variety of games. So having not the most detailed knowledge of every single thing he's talking about is a little different than somebody like a Jenny D, who is exclusively not just Dungeons & Dragons, but is exclusively a 5th edition DM. She is exclusively 5th edition, nothing else. That's all she does. All of her content, okay? And we're not talking that she hasn't read through Chrysanthemum's Guide to DEI and Inclusion or whatever new stupid ass rule book they've come out with recently. We're not talking that she's hasn't read The Paladin's Guide to Being Even More Overpowered and Broken Than We Originally Had You, buy this book for power creep. We're talking about the DMG, the core rulebook. One of the 3 books that anybody who even thinks about charging money to run a Dungeons & Dragons game should be intimately familiar with. Should know, not necessarily the page number, but should be able to open up the Dungeon Master's Guide with a reasonable level of precision and land close to what she's looking for, be it a magic item chart, be it a what size are communities supposed to be, or be it a chapter on certain kinds of variant rules. What makes it even worse is if you go back and you watch a lot of her older videos, and she comes up with, this is how I handle it at my table, and this is such a unique and neat way to play the game and stuff. Then you turn around and you find that shit sitting right there in the variant rules in the DMG, and she didn't even know it was there because she didn't bother to do the barest minimum homework for what she's supposed to be an expert in. And then she had the gall to accept a paycheck and a vacation to go get paid to provide that to other people. And I'm telling you right now, if my ass shelled out $5 or $6 grand to go play Dungeons and Dragons in a castle, and I was promised celebrity, elite, high-level, professional dungeon masters, somebody who hadn't even bothered to read the core rule books, to me would be somebody that would be almost fraudulent to the level of, it's almost to the level of false advertising when you think about it. Anyway, that's what I got for right now. That's the drama that's going on. I want to get through that so that I can get back to world building, and I'll see you guys next time when we move away from the drama.